In the explosive courtroom showdown, a federal judge has just delivered a blistering ultimatum to the acting director of ICE: obey the law or face contempt, hauling him into court under threat of personal sanctions for brazenly defying judicial orders, forcing the release of detainees in a humiliating climb-down that could unravel the Trump administration's entire aggressive immigration enforcement machine. This isn't just a legal spat, it's a full-blown constitutional crisis unfolding in real time, with ICE accused of trampling due process for dozens of immigrants, and we're breaking it all down over the next 14 minutes with hard facts from the Washington Post, Reuters, NBC News, and more. Let's dive straight into the summoning, the unprecedented order that brought ICE to its knees. On January 27, 2026, Chief U.S. District Judge Patrick J. Schiltz in the District of Minnesota issued a scathing, no-holds-barred ruling demanding that acting ICE Director Todd Lyons personally appear before him on January 30th to explain why his agency has flagrantly ignored court orders in immigration cases. Schiltz didn't mince words. He laid it out plain: obey the law or face contempt. In his written order, the judge declared, "This is one of dozens of court orders with which respondents have failed to comply in recent weeks. The court's patience is at an end." He called summoning the head of a federal agency an extraordinary step, but justified it by ICE's likewise extraordinary violations, noting that lesser measures like repeated warnings, extensions, and even contempt warnings to lower officials had failed spectacularly. This wasn't a polite invitation, it was a judicial thunderbolt, with Schiltz explicitly threatening to hold Lyons personally in contempt if explanations fell short, potentially leading to fines, sanctions, or even jail time for the director himself. The hearing was set to be a public reckoning, broadcast to the nation, but in a frantic last-minute twist, ICE released the key detainee just hours before the deadline, canceling the showdown. But not before the damage was done and the precedent was set. Now, the defiance? How ICE's actions ignited this firestorm. Under President Trump's renewed immigration surge, ICE has deployed thousands of agents to states like Minnesota for mass detentions, targeting undocumented immigrants in a sweeping crackdown that critics call draconian and supporters hail as long overdue enforcement. But Schiltz blasted the agency for charging in without any plan to handle the inevitable flood of legal challenges: habeas petitions, lawsuits, and demands for due process hearings. Reuters reports that ICE has ignored or delayed compliance in numerous recent cases, causing significant hardship to aliens, many of whom have lawfully lived and worked in the United States for years and done absolutely nothing wrong. This isn't isolated sloppiness, it's a systemic rebellion against judicial oversight, with ICE prioritizing enforcement quotas over constitutional rights, like prompt bond hearings, which determine if detainees can be released while their cases proceed. Schiltz's order pulls back the curtain on an agency acting like it's above the law, defying the very courts meant to check executive power. Protests have erupted in Minneapolis, fueled further by ICE's use of lethal force in related operations, agents fatally shooting U.S. citizens Renee Good and Alex Pretty during raids this month, amplifying accusations of overreach, brutality, and a pattern of unchecked aggression. The cases: ground zero for this clash, where individual stories reveal the human cost and legal chaos. Take Juan Tobay Robles, an Ecuadorian man who entered the U.S. illegally as a minor in 1999 and has lived here ever since, building a life without incident, working, paying taxes, raising a family. Detained at Fort Snelling in St. Paul amid the surge, Robles filed a habeas petition challenging his indefinite hold. On January 14th, Judge Schiltz ordered ICE to either provide a bond hearing within 7 days or release him outright, a standard due process requirement under the Immigration and Nationality Act and Supreme Court precedents like Zadvidas v. Davis, which limits prolonged detention without individualized review. ICE blew past the deadline, keeping Robles locked up without explanation or justification, prompting Schiltz to escalate with the contempt threat and the direct summons to Lyons. In a desperate bid to dodge the high-profile hearing, ICE released Robles on January 27th, transferring him to Texas. His attorney, Graham Ojala Barber, confirmed it to NBC News, calling it a victory born of judicial pressure. But Robles is just the tip of the iceberg. Schiltz referenced dozens of similar violations, including missed hearings for long-term residents, families separated without cause, and detainees held in limbo for weeks or months without the required process. PBS reports that these cases highlight ICE's pattern of stonewalling, turning routine detentions into protracted battles that clog courts, erode trust in the system, and inflict needless suffering on individuals and communities. The legal battle, at its heart, a ferocious tug of war between federal executive power and judicial authority in the volatile arena of immigration law. The Constitution's separation of powers is on full display here. The executive branch, through DHS and ICE, enforces immigration statutes like the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act, which allows detentions during removal proceedings. But courts, as the third branch, safeguard due process under the Fifth Amendment, ensuring no one is deprived of liberty without fair hearings and individualized determinations. Vox analysis points out that this conflict echoes historic clashes, like during the Obama and first Trump eras, where judges blocked family separations, travel bans, and other overreaches for violating constitutional limits. Under Trump 2.0, the surge, fueled by executive orders ramping up deportations, has overwhelmed systems, leading to what Schiltz calls a deliberate unpreparedness and refusal to adapt. Legal experts at the American Immigration Council argue this defiance risks eroding the rule of law, setting a precedent where agencies pick and choose which orders to follow. If contempt is pursued in future cases, it could lead to Supreme Court intervention, testing limits on executive immunity in enforcement actions, and the judiciary's ability to hold federal officials accountable. Meanwhile, ICE's leadership shakeups, Trump reshuffling amid the surge, only heighten the drama, with critics labeling it a war on the courts, and supporters framing it as necessary toughness against an illegal invasion. Finally, the fallout, a cascade of consequences that's already reshaping the immigration landscape and igniting political firestorms. Robles' release is a symbolic win for advocates, but it underscores how judicial threats are forcing ICE's hand, potentially leading to mass releases if non-compliance continues and judges ramp up sanctions. Protests in Minnesota have intensified, with crowds chanting, "No justice, no peace" outside federal buildings, amplified by the fatal shootings of Citizens Good and Pretty, which ACLU lawsuits tie to reckless tactics and lack of accountability. Politically, this hands ammunition to Democrats, with the House Oversight Committee launching probes into ICE's systemic contempt, while Republicans defend it as essential enforcement against border chaos. Broader implications? A chilling effect on ICE operations if judges continue to impose personal accountability on directors, or escalation if the administration pushes back with appeals, pardons, or legislation to limit judicial oversight. As Vox warns, this could fracture public trust in institutions, turning immigration into a battlefield where no one wins, detainees suffer, agents face impossible pressures, and the nation remains divided. In conclusion, this contempt threat isn't just about one director or one detainee. It's a dramatic expose of a system in crisis, where executive zeal crashes against judicial safeguards, threatening the very foundations of American justice and separation of powers. As the dust settles, the question looms: will defiance prevail, or will the rule of law strike back with full force? If this riveting breakdown gripped you, smash like, subscribe, and ring the bell. We'll track every explosive development. Thanks for watching.